June 18th, 1972, 9:43 p.m. The waitress refilled Jimmy Cross's coffee for the third time. He hadn't touched the first two cups. They sat there, cold, untouched, like everything else in his life that was about to be abandoned. Across the booth, FBI Special Agent Michael Torrance was eating cherry pie, slowly, deliberately, the kind of man who enjoyed watching people squirm. Jimmy Cross had been Frank Matthews's bodyguard for 6 years. 6 years of silence, 6 years of watching doors, 6 years of sleeping 4 hours a night because Frank Matthews never slept more than 5. 6 years of loyalty to a man who'd built an empire that the Mafia couldn't touch and the government couldn't break. And tonight, in a Newark diner that smelled like burnt coffee and lies, Jimmy was about to break all of it. Torrance pushed the pie plate aside, leaned forward. "Let me be clear," he said. His voice was flat, bureaucratic, the voice of a man who'd made this speech before. "We don't need you to testify. We don't need you to wear a wire. We don't need you to gather evidence." He pulled out a photograph, placed it face down on the table. "We just need you to put him in a car, drive him to a gas station, walk away." Torrance flipped the photo over. Frank Matthews, getting into his Cadillac outside a Brooklyn restaurant, unaware, vulnerable. The photo was dated 4 days ago. June 21st. 3 days from now, Atlantic City, Speedway gas station, Route 322, 4 p.m. You drive. He sits in the back like always. You pull in for gas, you go to the bathroom, you don't come back. Torrance slid another envelope across the table, thicker than the first. $50,000, right now, tonight, down payment. The rest, $200,000 more, gets wired to an account in your new name within 48 hours of delivery, plus witness protection, new identity, new city, you, your wife, your daughter, all of you safe. Jimmy stared at the envelope. $50,000. More money than his father made in 10 years working the docks. "He trusts you," Torrance said quietly. "That's all we need." Jimmy's hand was steady when he reached for the envelope. His voice was steady when he spoke. "When do I get the location details?" "Tomorrow, noon. Same payphone you used to set up this meeting." Jimmy picked up the envelope, put it inside his jacket, right next to his heart. "Done," he said. What Jimmy didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Frank Matthews had been watching him for 2 weeks, testing him, measuring him, preparing for exactly this moment. Rewind, June 4th, 1972. Frank Matthews didn't survive by trusting people. He survived by testing them. When you move $15 million a year in heroin through 21 cities, when you're the first black man to look the Italian Mafia in the eye and say no, and live to tell about it, when the DEA has your photograph pinned to every field office wall from Harlem to Los Angeles, you don't assume loyalty, you confirm it, constantly. Frank had a system. Every man in his inner circle got tested, not once, continuously. The same way a jeweler tests gold. Apply pressure, measure the reaction, see if it bends or breaks. The test was always the same. Give them a reason to betray you. Make it easy. Make it lucrative. Make it seem safe. Then watch what they do. 2 weeks earlier, Frank's contact inside the Newark Police Department, a lieutenant named Daniels who'd been on Frank's payroll for 3 years, told him something interesting. The FBI had approached 3 people in Frank's organization. Not soldiers, not street dealers. Inner circle. People who rode in cars with Frank. People who knew his schedules, his safe houses, his routines. 2 of them reported the FBI contact within 24 hours. Jimmy Cross didn't. Frank didn't confront him, didn't fire him, didn't even change the way he looked at him. He just started planning. Because in Frank Matthews's world, silence was never neutral. Silence was always a decision, and Jimmy had made his. June 19th, 1972, 11 a.m. The payphone rang exactly on time. Jimmy was standing outside a Sunoco station in Brooklyn. The phone booth smelled like urine and cigarettes. Graffiti covered every surface. Names, threats, declarations of love that wouldn't last the summer. He picked up on the second ring. Yeah, the voice on the other end was different from Torrance. Younger, more nervous. Atlantic City Speedway gas station, Route 322, June 21st, 4 p.m. exactly. Get Matthews there alone. No crew, no backup cars, just you driving. Him in the back. Understand? I understand. There's an address in the envelope we gave you. Go there tonight. 8 p.m. First payment is waiting. 50,000 cash. The rest comes after delivery. And then you disappear. We'll handle the rest. Click. Jimmy stood in the phone booth for 3 full minutes after the line went dead. Cars passed on the street. People walked by. Life continued like nothing was happening. But Jimmy's hands were shaking now, just a little, just enough to notice. He'd been with Frank Matthews through federal raids, through police stakeouts, through Mafia sit-downs where the wrong word could get you killed. He took a bullet in the shoulder in 1970, protecting Frank during a botched ambush in Philadelphia. 3 Sicilian shooters hired by the Gambino family. Frank paid for the surgery, visited him every single day in the hospital, brought him books, called him brother, and now Jimmy was going to hand him over to the people who'd been hunting him for 5 years. He told himself it wasn't personal, it was mathematics. Frank's empire was too big. The heat was too much. The DEA was closing in. The Italians wanted blood. The streets were getting dangerous. It was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. This way, at least Jimmy would survive the collapse. His family would be safe. His daughter could go to college. His wife could stop looking over her shoulder every time a police car drove past. At least, that's what he kept telling himself. June 21st, 1972, 2:30 p.m. Frank Matthews was reading the New York Times in his Brooklyn apartment when Jimmy arrived. "Let's take a ride," Frank said without looking up from the paper. His voice was calm, flat, the same voice he used to order lunch or order a hit. "Atlantic City. Got a meeting with some people?" Jimmy nodded. "What time?" "Leave now. Take the scenic route." Scenic route meant side roads, no highways, harder to follow. Standard procedure when Frank didn't want attention. They walked down to the street. The Cadillac was waiting. 1971 Eldorado, black exterior, cream leather interior. The car Frank loved. The car Jimmy had driven hundreds of times. Frank got in the back seat. Like always, Jimmy slid behind the wheel, started the engine. The radio was playing something soft. Marvin Gaye. "What's going on?" They pulled into traffic. For the first 20 minutes, neither man spoke. Frank was reading his newspaper. Calm, unhurried, like this was any other afternoon. But Jimmy's mind was screaming. The plan was simple. Pull into the gas station at 4 p.m. exactly. Tell Frank he needed to use the restroom. Walk inside. Walk out the back door where a car would be waiting. By the time Frank realized something was wrong, Jimmy would be gone, and federal agents would be surrounding the Cadillac. Simple, clean, done, except something felt wrong. Frank was too quiet, even for Frank, and Frank Matthews was never careless, never unaware, never vulnerable. Jimmy's hands tightened on the steering wheel. 3:47 p.m. They were 13 minutes from the gas station. Jimmy could feel sweat forming on the back of his neck despite the air conditioning. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure Frank could hear it from the back seat. Then Frank spoke. "Pull over here." Jimmy's stomach dropped into his shoes. They were on a 2-lane road, pine trees on both sides, no buildings, no other cars, miles from the Atlantic City Speedway station. "Here?" Jimmy's voice came out too tight, too high. "Yeah, need to check something in the trunk." Jimmy's brain was racing. This wasn't the plan. They were supposed to be at the gas station. Frank wasn't supposed to stop. Was this a test? Did Frank know? Was this how it ended? "Something wrong with the car?" Jimmy asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just pull over. Jimmy pulled onto the shoulder. Gravel crunched under the tires. He put the car in park but kept the engine running. Frank stepped out, calm, unhurried. He walked to the back of the Cadillac, popped the trunk. Jimmy sat frozen in the driver's seat. His hand was on the door handle. Part of him wanted to run. Part of him wanted to floor the gas pedal and drive until he ran out of road. But his body wouldn't move. He just sat there, listening to Frank move things around in the trunk. Then silence, long, heavy silence. Then Frank's voice, quiet, almost gentle. "Jimmy, come here." Those two words felt like a death sentence. Jimmy's legs barely worked when he stepped out of the car. Every step toward the trunk felt like walking toward an execution. His mouth was dry. His hands were numb. He reached the back of the car. The trunk was open, and inside, laid out like evidence at a crime scene, were three things: a Maryland driver's license, Jimmy's photograph, a name he'd never seen before, Robert Hastings, a .38 revolver, not Frank's, not one Jimmy recognized, serial number filed completely off, and a business card, FBI, Special Agent Michael Torrance, with a phone number handwritten on the back and a note, "Call when it's done." Jimmy felt the earth tilt beneath his feet. His vision blurred. His ears were ringing. Frank was leaning against the car, arms crossed, face completely unreadable. Not angry, not sad, just watching. "I found these this morning," Frank said quietly. "Thought you might want to explain." Jimmy's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His brain was shorting out. How? How did Frank know? How did he find them? Those items were hidden in Jimmy's apartment, in a locked drawer, under the floorboards. Frank didn't move, didn't raise his voice, just kept watching. 6 years, Jimmy, Frank said. Each word was measured, controlled. "I paid for your mother's surgery when she had cancer. I was at your daughter's baptism. I gave you a seat at my table when nobody else would." Jimmy finally found his voice. It came out broken. "Frank, Frank held up one hand. "Don't." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Frank spoke again. His voice was quieter now, almost tired. "The FBI approached you June 4th, Newark Diner. Agent Torrance. $250,000 total. 50 up front, 200 after delivery. Witness protection for you and your family." Frank looked at his watch. "You were supposed to drive me to Atlantic City Speedway gas station, Route 322, 4 p.m. Let them grab me, walk out the back, disappear." He closed the trunk. The sound echoed in the empty air. "We've got 11 minutes before they realize you're not coming." Frank walked to the passenger door, opened it, sat down. "Get in," he said. "You're still driving." 4:04 p.m. They drove past the Atlantic City Speedway gas station at 4 minutes past 4. Jimmy could see them. Even though they were trying to blend in, he could see them. 4 unmarked Crown Victorias parked at angles around the station. Men in casual clothes who stood too straight, who watched too carefully, who kept their hands near their waistbands where guns were hidden. Frank didn't even glance in their direction. He was looking out the window at the pine trees rolling past. They drove in silence for 40 minutes. Jimmy's hands were shaking so badly he could barely keep the car straight. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. He kept waiting for Frank to tell him to pull over again, kept waiting for the bullet, kept waiting for it to be over. But Frank just sat there, quiet, calm, watching the world go by. Finally, Frank spoke. "I'm not going to kill you, Jimmy." Jimmy exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. His whole body sagged with relief so intense it hurt. "But you're done. You understand that?" Jimmy nodded. He couldn't speak. "Pull over here." They were in the middle of nowhere. Empty road, trees, sky, nothing else. Frank reached into his jacket. Jimmy flinched hard. But Frank pulled out an envelope. Manila. Thick. 20,000, Frank said. Cash. Enough to disappear, really disappear. Not FBI witness protection where they own you for the rest of your life. Just gone. He placed the envelope on the dashboard. "Take your family. Leave tonight. Don't use that fake ID the FBI gave you. Don't contact Torrance. Don't contact anyone in the organization. Don't ever come back to the East Coast." Frank opened the passenger door, stepped out onto the gravel shoulder. He looked at Jimmy through the open window, and for just a second Jimmy saw something in Frank's eyes. Not anger, not hatred, disappointment. "If I ever see you again," Frank said quietly, "we won't have this conversation." Then he turned and started walking down the empty road, alone, hands in his pockets, like he was just out for an afternoon stroll. Jimmy sat there, hands still shaking, envelope on the dashboard, watching Frank Matthews walk away and disappear into the distance. He never saw Frank Matthews again. Neither did the FBI. Neither did anyone. July 2nd, 1973. 11 days later, DEA agents kicked down the door of Frank Matthews' apartment at 4:30 in the morning. They found his Cadillac in the garage, engine still warm. They found clothes in the closet, food in the refrigerator. They found $15 million missing. They found no Frank Matthews. 51 years later, he's never been found. No body, no sighting, no credible lead. And Jimmy Cross, who moved to Oregon that same night, who changed his name, who never touched the drug world again, spent the rest of his life wondering the same thing. Did Frank know he was going to disappear that day? Was the betrayal just one more test before Frank became a ghost? Or was Jimmy just one more thing Frank had to let go of before he vanished? The answer died on that empty road in New Jersey, in the trunk of a Cadillac, in the silence between two men who once called each other brother. Some secrets stay buried, some men stay gone, and some questions don't have answers.